Welcome everyone to India LSD, Love, Sex, Desire, where technology meets the erotic. So I grew up learning to express myself through emojis like these, describe my identity in terms of ASL, age, sex, location, a question that flashed across every Yahoo chat room growing up. And today, I understand what it means to find intimacy and maintain friendship across oceans through Skype calls, Instagram filters, and WhatsApp messages. But my experiences are not unique. I'm part of a generation that came into adulthood as the internet came onto the scene. It's not really surprising then that I spent the last 5 years exploring the intersection of technology and human connection. From researching how social factors impact mobile phone use in Jharkhand and Bihar, to studying the biological basis of empathy in the light of changes in communication technology, to the topic of today's discussion, how the internet is shaping love, sex, and desire in India today. Over the next hour, an amazing group of panelists are going to share their thoughts on the intersection of technology and intimacy. Each of them spend their days working at the intersection in these fields, each in different ways. What I'm going to try and do in the next 10 minutes is to share 3 themes emerging from my research on the dating apps ecosystem in India to situate this discussion better. The first is about history, the history of technology and of desire. The second is about institutions, the institutions that structure our everyday life, politics, media, religion, economics. And the third, and perhaps the most important, is about the human condition today, where there's a blurring between digital and physical in all that we do. So starting with history, in the 1990s, there was a sudden burst of images, text, and commodities in post-liberalization India that were erotic in nature. This sudden spread of erotic material came partly from TV shows such as The Bold and the Beautiful, and partly from locally produced radio, television, and newspaper content made specifically for an Indian audience. Today again, we see the proliferation of the erotic in India. But this time, it's not just through television, magazines, and radio, but through the rapid rise of global and local dating apps. From TrulyMadly, Tinder, Grindr, Woo, V, Isle, Coxio, Twango, Two Mangoes, Bumble, Happen, Desi Crush, I Flush, Dilmil, Thrill, and there are still more to fill. And apart from being an interesting assortment of names, these apps illustrate the tension between national and transnational, global and local, in the sphere of intimacy is not something new, but a very historical connection and process. So let's go back in time again, this time again to the 90s, because I'm a 90s kid, when Giti Thadani, the godmother of the Indian lesbian activist movement, founded an NGO in Delhi called Sakhi that put up advertisements in Bombay's popular gay magazine, Bombay Dost. These ads asked women seeking out other women to write in to find others like themselves. Women who did would first receive a reply from the NGO, and then, only then, if the writer appeared to genuinely be a woman, would a networking list of other such women be shared with them, and then they could all begin corresponding with each other. People mailing Sakhi often specifically look towards the organization for information on how to be lesbian. One particular letter goes something like this: I hope Sakhi will take the lead and guide us. What about lesbian marriage and lesbian sex? Girls in Delhi, are their numbers increasing? I'm eager to know. Do foreign ladies come here and mingle with our ladies? Can you please send an educational note about lesbianism and female bisexuality? Here, a networking list for Indian lesbians 2.5 decades ago, operating through the country's postal service, shares the same connective properties as most dating apps today, from account authentication to tips about appropriate sexual and romantic behavior. So though today we'll be discussing what it means to be erotic in India 2016, when you can swipe to find love on the move and buy a sex toy sitting at home, The magic of the present is certainly alluring, but human desire and its expression through communication technology, as we're seeing here, has a far longer history. So this is the front page cover of India Today in 2002. A man, a woman, a city, and 2 cell phones. The headline reads, "Love in a time of SMS." As SMS becomes the latest addiction of the upwardly mobile, it's becoming increasingly used as an instant and intimate way of saying, let's get together. The evidence is all around us. Here is the front page cover of India Today, the same magazine, a decade and a half later. June 2016. A man, a woman, kissing on the lips. Their bodies constituted by the mobile apps they use. Love Me Tinder, a sex revolution driven by dating apps. Dating apps are the new Cupids, urging a swipe-happy generation to find love, sex, and romance on the move. From love in the time of cholera, to love in the time of SMS, to love in the time of dating apps. The specifics of technologies that define a generation certainly change. SMSs are no longer cutting edge. Instant messaging services and dating apps have entered the scene. But have desires changed? Or is history simply repeating itself through different devices? Moving from history to institutions that structure the everyday, let's go to China, where Ma Baoli, who goes by the alias Geng Li, started a web discussion forum for gay men called danlan.org in 2000. Just 3 years after homosexuality was officially decriminalized in China, and while he was still an officer for the Chinese police. The online forum evaded notice when a government shut down similar sites for immoral conduct. That was until a newspaper, a state-run media establishment, released a report about the struggles of gay people in China, drawing light to the organization in the public sphere. Geng Li had to leave his own province, his job, and move to the more liberal Beijing, where he navigated legal and bureaucratic loopholes to secure political sanctioning that was required for his organization to grow. Volunteer and NGO activities in healthcare, particularly awareness activities about HIV/AIDS, brought him in favor with the then Vice Chancellor of China, further securing his company's safety, and allowed him to publicly launch Blued, a homegrown Chinese gay men's dating app that secured $30 million from its latest round of funding and is estimated to have more overall users than Grindr, the original gay men's hookup app. Meanwhile, in India, where Section 377 has unfortunately kept homosexuality illegal, Grindr works with its non-profit activist wing, Grindr for Equality, to occasionally advertise and publicize pro-LGBTQ events. Now, I'm saying all of this because while the first image that comes to mind when picturing dating apps is something very personal to an individual, very intimate, apps themselves have to navigate a maze of political and social and economic realities before they become part of our phones. The structures that govern our everyday life, state, society, religion, culture, the media, economy, they not only influence our interactions with communication technology at an individual level, but the possible forms that technology and desire can take at an institutional level. Which brings me to my final point, which is that we live in a world where the line between offline and online intimacy is becoming increasingly blurred. The average adult internet user claims to spend over 20 hours online per week. India is now the 3rd largest smartphone market in the world, and a comparative ethnographic study of social media across 9 countries, Brazil, Chile, China, India, Italy, Trinidad, Turkey, and the UK, found that Indians in particular are influenced by the realities of offline life, caste, class, and gender. So, with all of this complexity, what does it mean to love, to be sexual, to desire another in a world of continuous digital connection? Well, that's a question I wish I knew the answer to. I don't. If I did, this PhD would be so much easier. But what I do know is that answer will involve doing 3 things. It will involve us being retrospective. remembering that the relationship between technology and intimacy has a long history. It will require us to be curious about the ways in which social, economic, and political institutions limit the possibilities of both technologies as well as our desires. And finally, and like I said, perhaps the hardest thing is that it will require us to be empathetic. Empathetic to the human condition today that we share, and that continually grapples with finding real connection as the boundaries between digital and the physical, both real in their own ways, become increasingly blurred. Thank you.
How has the internet or cell phone technologies fundamentally changed the relationship between love, sex, and desire in contemporary India? Like, is there something, have they all fundamentally changed it, or are we doing the same stuff in just different ways?
I think the taboos have sort of crumbled, at least in urban India, where our audience is for the LSDcast. And we find a lot more engagement. People take more ownership, but that's because they're able to look for things and find communities online in a way they couldn't before. So somebody who is attracted to somebody from their own gender can find people to talk to outside their physical space and relate, whether it's about kinks or preferences or how they identify with be LGBTQIA, C, other things.
Yeah, so I mean, exactly to your point, there are a lot of conversations we never have in this country. Across the world as well, many of these taboos here, but particularly in India, there are a lot of conversations that are just not safe to have, but people have always had those questions, and that's why people are alone, because they've never had this outlet to ask, to inquire, to understand, to connect. And this urge to connect with other human beings is fundamental. It's core to sort of our existence. I don't think a human being could survive for very long if they were the only person in the planet. And that need, that urge to somehow find that similarity, that bonding, that space, that personal space to explore, discover themselves, express themselves, and connect, and find relationships or find those connections hasn't existed. But technology, especially as sort of access gets more and more democratized. Dating apps as a part of the equation, because finding connections and ability to explore, ability to do what you want, have this safe space and control that I want to connect with you, but I don't want this fear of you turning me away. It's not awkward to walk up to you like it would be to walk up to you in real life anymore. And if I want to navigate this at my own pace and my own comfort, and if I don't like this, I want the option to say no easily. Those things are powers that India's, I would say, just discovering.
I think latent needs and desires I think they're fundamentally the same, right? They were 20 years back, 50 years back, 100 years back, since Adam and Eve. I think technology has obviously leveled the playing field, especially from a girl's perspective, and we look at that a lot. It's given them access, it's given them the power to say no, it's given them the power to accept. In the old days, it was the guys who were, getting the Janam Patris and rejecting girls or whatever. Now that power has clearly with dating apps moved into the hands of the girls. And that's in a way, I mean, it's cliched, but it's empowering in a way, right? So I think, yeah, technology has clearly made a difference, but the reasons why people come on board, reasons why people are on dating apps or the good old chat rooms, those desires and needs are obviously very inherent to us as humans, right? And those remain the same.
I think like also the interesting thing is to ask the question in reverse, which is how does desire change technology? Because I think like there's a libido, a human libido, which pushes technology to meet its needs, right? And in many ways, technology is an extension of our senses. It's not something outside of what the human body and mind are. So I agree with everything that everybody said, that in a sense.
Virtual orgasms now, there are apps for that.
Yes, there are. I mean, but it's also about, it's about allowing your own senses to have more and more and more extended play in the world in some ways. So I think, yeah, at one level, the fact, anybody who's queer, I'll use that term, so in that sense, anybody who didn't want to be married or who was gay or exploratory of their sexuality in some ways always has harnessed, pornography has always suggested commercial ways to use technology. So in that sense, I would say this is an important question to keep in mind. I think one thing that apps, along with doing all of those things, which is fundamentally different for Indian society now, is that they actually increase a sense of individuality. Because most of the time we think of ourselves in terms of our social identity, and private space is the one space we don't get, right? Like, I think that you can have that space to understand yourself, to make some mistakes, and those mistakes are not going to be having huge repercussions, which is a very important freedom and leads to every other type of freedom. On the other hand, I also do think that because of this very algorithm-based kind of, the needs of commerce, there's also a kind of streamlining that happens of class and caste right now. Like, when you listen to people talk about what they are doing via apps, it is to assure you that it's not going to be a chaotic, bacchanalian space. But in fact, it's pretty safe and it's pretty nice, and it's, largely matrimonially inclined. So I think when you look at the advertisements, and I'll step away from dating apps to talk about matrimonial apps and websites, they are continuously incorporating the idea of choice into the universe of the family. I will choose, my daughter will have a choice also in the matter. I will not choose for her. That's a shift, and it's also domestication of choice. So both things happen, I think.
I mean, what's amazing is that both TrulyMadly and Tinder are big hits in India, right? One is a global giant, one is a very desi contender. And in a sense, when we see your ads, they kind of reflect the tensions between, conservative and liberal ideas of desire in a sense. And you can just, by looking at both your recent ads in that sense. Obviously, both of y'all want to make it big, and both of y'all must have done extensive research before you entered and before you chose to take this particular approach. So what made you believe that each of you had to take just this particular, either sanskari or like very modern? What made you believe that you had to take this particular road to get your audience?
So I think our belief is that we need to bring dating out of the closet, right? So it's not as if people don't date in India before guys like us launched. Girls go out with guys, they go to cafe coffee days, they go to Starbucks, but they will not say they're going on a date, right? So our campaign for the last 1 year, and if you see a lot of our previous communication, has been around, let's call a date, right? It's a date if, it's not a date if, and then we did man parade, we did boy browsing. So the idea is to get dating out of the closet, remove the taboo around dating, so as to speak, right? And I think we have to take it head on. We can't pussyfoot it. When we launched a year and a half, 2 years ago, we also actually called ourselves a matchmaking app. We were scared of calling ourselves a dating app. But when we went out there, spoke to a bunch of girls, they said, if your entire positioning in terms of how the product looks, etc., is completely dating. So why aren't you using the word dating? And I think even Tinder globally at that point in time, and correct me if I'm wrong, did not use the word dating even globally. I think it's in the last year and a half, that Tinder's also now started saying dating when it, on the description.
Well, they said social discovery, and that's what our core
yeah,
is.
but it uses the word dating now, which it wasn't doing earlier, even globally. So we said, let's take dating head on. Let's start talking about dating. Till we don't start talking about it, we'll keep being compared to matchmaking websites and shadi.com and Bharat Matrimony, etc. So I think it's part of that, journey. That journey started with something called Breaking Stereotypes, which we did. It went on to Man Parade, where there was a bunch of girls looking at and hooting at different types of boys passing by. Did boy browsing, where again it was about the surreptitious ways in which girls also check out boys. Right? It's not only guys who are leching at girls, but girls also in their own way check out boys. Then we did Creep Kawali, about all the creeps and how we keep them out. And this is pretty much the culmination in a way of that thought process, that why does a girl have to be judged? Why does there have to be that walk of shame? And if there is, then the world needs to apologize to the girls, right? So I think it's part of that journey, and that's how we came up with
But
this.
you took a very different sanskari approach. So tell us about.
So, you know what? Actually, it is not that different if you think about it. As Sachin said, we need to bring dating out of the closet. Dating is a normal word. And if we've done enough research, every time I ask users, what is a date? And if I ask 10 people, I get at least 8 different definitions of what a date is. And 8 different euphemisms by which they would explain it to, friends, family, colleagues, and so on and so forth. We don't know what a date is. We don't call dating a dating. We are somehow afraid of acknowledging the relationships that we are all navigating and also struggling to navigate. Pretty much everyone, especially in urban India, from who's single between 16 to 25, 90% people are dating or actively or trying to, moving in and out of relationships. But we don't talk about it. And part of it is stigma and conversation. We don't have the vocabulary for it. And part of it is we don't know what happens when we have this conversation, right? So for us, I mean, this campaign, honestly, is just a part of of many things, many formats of communication that we've been doing and we'll continue to do. And this was limited to Facebook. So it's not a mass campaign, but it is targeted at one thought. Let's talk about it and let's normalize it. So actually, similar to what Sachin was saying, there is a sense of judgment. And we said, how do you remove judgment? You make something extremely normal. You put a normal Indian girl, a normal Indian family, a normal Indian conversation, not for me, a girl that could be me, a girl who is modern yet traditional, and then say, and put it in a conversation that's, if it makes you uncomfortable, it makes you think. Modern Indian girls, like one thing I have realized is every time I talk to them and ask them, like, what do you really care about? We have sort of learned, we've grown this thick skin, and we've learned to not care about opinions of people who don't matter to us. But I still care about my close friends, my colleagues, my mentors, my family, their approval, and that is a space where having a conversation as adults is completely absent in this society. So
and nothing like mummy to say it's okay.
It is as I'm saying, it is the most uncomfortable yet normal situation you could be in.
Because in this tension between, and Taru said Indian yet modern, right? I mean, this axis of Indian on one side, modern on other side. Are you seeing in the stories that you encounter, say on Agents of Ishq, in the stories that you talk about in LSD, are you seeing this tension along the same axis? I want you to share stories from your work.
So to start with, I have to put the disclaimer out that we're in English, we're on smartphones, we speak to a very small subsection of society. Within that subsection, though, we do see that. Not a whole lot, because people do ask more general questions about cheating and sleeping with somebody on the first date. But even in the 23 weeks we've been around, we've got questions about parental expectations, about gender roles, where somebody had a question about how the boyfriend acts really different around his mom and expects her to kind of do the same stuff, though he says he's a feminist. So how do you navigate those? How do you draw attention to having a conversation about it while being authentic to yourself and feeling this tension between what society thinks you should be doing, what your partner thinks you should be doing, what your parents think you should be doing, and what you see reflected back toward you when you feel like you're the only voice that is different. So yeah, we do.
I think at Agents of Ishq, we obviously are like seeing a much more interesting variety of voices, I would say. I mean, obviously this traditional and modern kind of thing, it's a perennial thing of India, of the world, because you're always changing from what you were and becoming something else, and both things are always in relationship to each other. But I would say that, like, there's a kind of, within a certain section that's urban, upper middle class, and wants to stay kind of within the boundary of normal, as they call it, which is conventional, which is to say, they basically want to get married and they want to have a certain lifestyle and earn a certain amount of money and have a certain kind of mobility. I think you see this conservatism much more. And I'll call it conservatism only in the sense that, like, I feel a lot of the conversation around dating apps becomes anxiety about not whether women are dating, but whom they are dating. So it's acceptable to date for quite some time. I mean, Barista made it much easier to date, and malls made it much easier to date because you're not going to the park, right? Like, I made a film about moral policing in a park, in which one girl said that if you have to meet somebody, it should not be in park, jiski image down ho chuki hai, right? So park ki image down ho chuki thi, but Barista ki image is not down because it's connected to certain kind of mobility, right? So I think, like, okay, you don't want the guys in your others inbox are creeps, but somehow the guys who are in your Facebook friends list are not creeps. I have some question about that. And I feel like this is a caste class division that happens, which there's an anxiety about only to do with women, right? And it's an anxiety that men of their class feel more than the women feel. It's my sense. On Agents of Ishq, because we are talking to people from all kinds of backgrounds, also people write to us, they can be anonymous. What I feel is that the inner life of people is a lot more interesting. And people are engaging with their sexuality in very interesting ways, in very wise and sensible ways, as well as in very wild and not always sensible ways. And they should be a little bit more sensible. But they are more exploratory. The other thing is, what is India is an important thing to ask. Because when you go into other parts of India, you see a very different life. So we just finished doing, we are going to start a new series of podcasts in a week called Love, Sex or India. Please check it out on the website. And we've done podcasts with people in UP and from very different backgrounds to many of the English-speaking kind of podcasts we did. We have also done podcasts with kids from Dharavi, say, right? Now, I don't think that they reflect necessarily this traditional versus modern divide in the same way. There is social pressure and there is social anxiety, but there's also great aspiration, and that aspiration is also sexual experience, romantic experience. We have, our first podcast is about a woman who was married, met a guy who was driving a bus. He winked at her in the rear view mirror and then they left love notes for each other. बहुत उनका लंबा इश्क चला till finally उसकी तरफ से भी I love you हो गई, मेरी तरफ से भी I love you हो गई. Then she revealed they were both married. They both left their spouses. They live together in a tiny town in UP. It's been 14 years. Now I think you're not hearing those stories, and they're making certain assumptions about what India is, you know. So I really wish that we would open up ourselves to Indians are the most self-hating lot. Urban Indians are very self-hating. So they'll always say Indians are repressed, Indians are backwards, Indians are this. But which Indians are you talking about? So I feel it's also nice for us to open that up and learn different things about ourselves. And also when you asked the earlier question, I feel like what's also happening with technology, which is a great thing, is that actually the India which is not repressed, the India of folk culture, the India of body culture, like a really desi culture, and by that I don't mean, you know, like you always, there's a whole online universe which just makes fun of India. But there's a kind of fun in India which they were not accessing, but I think thanks to technology, many of these forms are coming back. So like we did that Lavani, and Lavani is a very racy and raunchy form which celebrates sexuality and exists in people's language. So I think these things are coming in, and we should engage with them a little bit more. Plus the technology that people in other places use is not dating apps. First of all, Indians can convert anything into a dating app. Let me just say that. They convert everything into a dating app. You know, like the Bombay police started a WhatsApp group, right? So for any problems that you had, instantly shairis, then some personal message.
They're a romantic country.
You know, your school WhatsApp. Yeah. So people are using WhatsApp and Facebook heavily in other parts of the country to meet and do lots of things which we don't know they're doing, because I don't think people are looking at that. Yeah.
So let's tease out some of these contrasts. Yeah. So you spoke, and let's go through them one by one. You spoke rural, urban. So I want to ask the other panelists, in everything that you're seeing, maybe with you, Taru, and then Sachin, is there a divide in terms of that you're seeing geographically between either people from different cities or people from cities and non-cities?
In our case, not really. The only thing is we are limited as a platform because with smartphone access, right? Like so it's sort of a top-down way of approaching the market, but we are being driven globally, and especially in India, by a very young digital native demographic. So at least from the smartphone universe of the world,
yeah.
Our largest audiences are 18 to 25-year-olds, people who've grown up on the smartphone, are much more comfortable communicating, transacting, and navigating, technology. And it's a very personal device that they have in their lives while they're growing up, which most of us did not have when we were growing up. So we see that they think of themselves as global citizens. In their minds, they consume similar popular culture, they have the same aspiration, and they have the same debates and questions and curiosity as anyone else. So the digital divide is, exists, but is not as steep because it's for this generation. And what happens is suddenly they have access. They have much fewer, spaces to have, like much fewer parks and malls and baristas, much more scrutiny and, watchful eyes and just questions that have never been asked. A lesser of a sense of community. At least larger cities have a sense of anonymity, college campuses and other communities, which is relatively less. So the physical spaces have been fewer, but the desires, the questions, and the need to connect is the same. So what we see now is, over a third of our users come from smaller cities and towns, and that's the group that's growing faster. But their identification is a very, global citizen identification.
So you're not seeing a difference?
We're not really. In fact, we're seeing more excitement in the sense it's more exploration. Okay. And I think this will evolve rapidly. Like I put a million disclaimers because again, it's a top-down smartphone, everything, and these are things that people navigate. As we were saying, each individual is at the end of the day different. There is a sense of individual identity that we have never discovered and cultivated that we're finally learning to express. So it takes a little bit of time and growth where we learn to navigate what we like, what we don't like, where to say no, what is consent, what is conversation, how do we navigate these. It takes a little bit of time and growth, but we've seen in the last 6 months alone a sea change. So, lots of disclaimers here as to what's going to happen.
Have you seen a difference in
Yeah, we see a
TrulyMadly?
lot of difference here. So, I mean, the audience is pretty much the same, but anecdotally, in Chennai, for example, I was there last week talking to a bunch of girls who uninstalled our app. And one of the biggest reasons which emerged was that guys in Chennai, this is their perception, are very clingy and don't take to rejection. So therefore,
Only in Chennai?
engaging with them, so engaging with them is not such a good idea in the first place because, if they like a guy and then they later, he'll probably end up stalking them or whatever. So they're kind of scared. In Ahmedabad, we were there in Ahmedabad a couple of weeks ago, and the guys there were saying that hookup karke karenge kahan pe? Because, hookup kar bhi liya to jayenge kahan, karenge kahan, because they're going to be at home. They all stay with their parents, right? They're not going to get a girl home and, whatever. So, I mean, like I said, these are anecdotal, but India is not a homogeneous society like it is in the West, right? What works in New York will work in San Francisco. India is very different. It is very diverse. Communication is a big one. We struggle with that a lot. A lot of our communication is very North India. It's very Hindi. It doesn't resonate with people, with a lot of people down south. So we find a fair bit of difference.
And I know yours is, do you see a difference with NRIs and Indians in how they access LSDcast?
A little bit, but not a whole lot. I think culturally, this is again anecdotal, culturally NRIs are more exposed to messaging as messages of body acceptance perhaps and sexuality than they are here. But I don't think we've got any listeners in small town India. I mean, it's an access issue. I mean, the very word podcast is.
After this event, wait and see.
Yeah, you all have like friends in Kota and Ranchi, you're going to listen
I mean,
to
half the
podcast.
MBAs in this room went to engineering school and then were in Kota. So now you'll be famous in Kota after this.
Right. LSD, cast, go Kota.
Where do old people go to find love, sex, desire?
Right, so as a podcaster, I can say we've got olds who listen to us because it's technology.
So old people listen to LSD
Yeah,
cast.
but young people also listen. We've got 18 to, I don't know. But as an old who's dating using your apps, so for research purposes, I've installed these apps.
It'll be nice to go online and see who's on Tinder now. Someone should just go online and like, who's swiping away? Or TrulyMadly, yeah.
But as a user,
Yeah.
I can say that I tried this about 2 years ago. And it was awful, yeah. And off and on when I lived in the US. And I have to say that even in the last 2 years, I'm surprised at how many more age-appropriate matches I have. I really thought when I got on your apps on Sunday that I would have. I've been on one of the others. I was on Dia's presentation, and they ran out of matches for me in 5 days.
Oh.
So that was 5 matches total. So I was quite surprised. I finished my profile at 83 messages.
Wow. Wow, we should clap for that.
I'm sure there are people who are younger who have 183 within the first 2 seconds.
Oh.
I'm
Should clap for them. No. Are you seeing difference in terms of old or young?
I have no insights here. We deal with people from 18 to 34. It plateaus out after that. I don't know what the rest of the population does. So no comment. Not interested, I don't know.
So in 18 to 34, is there a difference?
So you're not going to do TrulyMadly senior?
There's an intent difference.
Hello, after 34, you're not senior. You're right.
Right.
Not as of now, not as of now. No, we see an intent differences there, obviously. So the 18 to 21 is more about friendships. It's not about dating, relationships, etc. If a friendship converts into a relationship, so be it. These are people who've typically moved from smaller towns to bigger towns to study or to work. So for them, it's about friendship. 22 to 26 typically is relationships, long-term dating, as we understand the word. And obviously for the 26 plus, because of our positioning, it's not matrimony, but it's certainly first step towards matrimony. And it plateaus out at 34. So intent is pretty much a function of age on any dating app, actually, for that matter. So, yeah.
You're seeing similar stuff?
For us, I think Tinder, our vision is, dating, yes, is the most popular use case on Tinder, but for us, I think our vision is about helping people discover people, human connections, period. And those, while romantic connections are the ones that we tend to sort of most actively pursue, as opposed to sort of passively. There are mostly romantic connections, but as Tinder has grown globally, and as sort of conversations and awareness have increased, we have seen that not only do people find other sorts of relationships, it's like a place where you come, you say hello to someone you like, who likes you back. You're not afraid of a fear of rejection, and there is no unsolicited messaging or stuff that you don't want. And it helps you discover. It's like walking into someone and saying hi. And then things happen when you say hi. Every conversation is different and leads to different outcomes. And we've seen that expectations vary for same individuals over a period of time. People have adapted and learned and heard so many different stories by now over the last 3.5, almost 4 years.
But you can't generalize that young people talk in a particular way, because I believe
hard,
millennials talk in text and young.
It's easy. I would say it's very tempting to generalize, but look, we are in every single country of the world, every single part of India, every single, the most conservative cultures to the most liberal so-called cultures. And we have realized that what is common, like why does this work? Why does this work by itself? Is because, again, it's very human, it's very unique, and it allows you to sort of tailor your experience. So what we've seen is, at least to answer the question that you specifically had, in terms of dating in India, yes, there are certain differences. Like, for example, because, the reality is 20-year-olds of today have had more relationships than the 27-year-olds of today. When I was in high school, 3 out of 100 people were dating in Delhi. Today, it's probably 90 out of 100. And, people just have navigated and had those conversations a lot more easier. So you see that. And therefore, you can extend it and extrapolate it, because these are codified socio-cultural norms of, talking to a person you don't know, period. Forget whether it's romantic, forget whether it's the same gender or the opposite gender, that we've all grown up with. So the younger lot have less of those norms, less of those rules, and have had the opportunity to explore and discover more without their own baggage. It's not about somebody telling you not to do if you're a 45-year-old. Probably no one can tell anyone anything. But you yourself, you're fighting this battle with yourself. So we see that on a spectrum. But even in non-dating, sort of just exploring myself, I am 45, divorced, and just want friends. I want somebody who's had similar life experiences. I want human connection, which is getting harder and harder in our society as we all get busier and drift away from conventional communities and friends and so on and so forth. And it's hard. It's been hard, but as we've seen people starting to explore that and understand and navigate for themselves what it means.
Paromita, and I want to ask you this as well, because you were nodding when he said over 34, and I felt like, because I've been thinking, is there I'm putting us in one boat and saying, do we communicate in text, and do the young people communicate with emojis or Pokemons or
no, I actually don't relate.
Pictures?
I don't relate to the divide, I must say. Neither in terms of, obviously, every age is different, but some people adapt.
But do we have to learn a new language which is not textual?
No, I don't think so. I feel like I love technology, and I'm always one of those people who, as I was witheringly told when I was doing an essay about love and dating in the time of apps, and I interviewed somebody who runs this kind of singles service, and of course 40 was their cutoff for letting people in, and I was like, so you think I'm ineligible, basically, right? So he's like, well, I would say you're an outlier. So outlier is the new 40, right? So whatever. But basically people who don't conform to the big norm of wanting to get married and live a certain heteronormative-ish life, right? So those who don't want to do that. But I have a theory about all this stuff, right? Because when you talk to people anecdotally, everybody's moaning and groaning about how they don't get any matches. I have some male friends whose phones I've taken from them, and I'm like, I'm going to ensure that you get a match. And I'll swipe, like that, okay? So, and then every 1 week I'm, got a match? Nothing. And I'm just like, why are you not getting a match? There's nothing. I would swipe on you if you appeared before me, right? So boys will tell you things like, oh, girls just get on Tinder so they can look at boys and laugh at them. Or boys, or men will say that, if you match with somebody on Tinder, their great anxiety is, will you say hi when they have said hi, right? So what I think is really interesting is what is going on inside afterwards, and how many people actually end up getting whatever they want out of the services. So my theory is that there's always a very small percentage of people who score high. From the beginning of time, there are people who score high. Like, starting from Lord Krishna, this 36,900 wives. And everybody else is kind of trying, not really making it, somehow hit and miss getting there. And you always have the fallback of your offline identity. And in India, to bahut zyada, as you said. So I feel like some of that happens. Where older people are concerned, I just want to say one thing. So I also wrote this piece on dating after 50 for Mint, some special on Valentine's Day. And so I spoke to a lot of women. So if you're a heterosexual woman, you really have a hard time because you have to date men, Indian men. The problem is not the app and it's not the age, but there is a really big problem in India of people, of genders not knowing how to speak to each other, and genders not knowing how to charm each other, genders not knowing amorous language and amorous behavior, because that is not something that we grow up with as a culture, right? So we only get it from movies, and that's not useful because movies are not real life.
Which teach you that you stalk until the woman says yes. Which teaches the woman to never look at someone, never have a conversation, assume that the person saying hi is decent. So that's the problem, right? We've taught since the 70s that you chase the girl, be the macho hero.
Even now, Ranjana is the
Sultan. The guy chases the girl until she says, calls her his girlfriend until she basically slaps him and says, dude, what are you talking about?
The amount of industry that's come around how to teach people how to make conversation, make friendship, make what dating is. And I think that's like a completely separate space that is creating what it means to talk to someone, what a good first contact looks like. And I think in many ways, the desperation for people to learn what it means to flirt and how to do all of that is being used. I wouldn't use the word manipulated, but there's a lot of teaching and educating going on, often with not the purpose to educate, but to make money for that particular industry. It's even skewing this balance between what it is to flirt and connect in a completely different way.
Well, I don't know how to put it. The problem is the men in India, right? I think
Agreed.
we would
One match.
be a far more successful company. I would probably have retired by now if we just had better men, right? Women put up their display pictures on TrulyMadly or any other dating app. They'll use filters, they'll pout, they'll make an effort to look good. Guys will take selfies. One, they won't even keep the camera here. They'll keep the camera here. We're anyway fairly round-faced, and our faces look even more bloated, right? And then these guys say that match nahi mila. They will take passport pictures, which they've given for some boring job, CV, and they put those passport pictures with a tie, with a flower on it or whatever. How the hell will you get matches, guys? Come on, get a life. So we've had to now start a service where we have a counselor who we match with guys.
Oh, that's right. So this is what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Is that premium? Do you have to pay for that?
Yeah, so it's going to be launched as a premium service next week. So we're teaching guys how to just put up better pictures. Not only that, it'll be high, H-I-I-I-I, H-I-Y-I. You have a lovely name, maybe one other cheesy kind of compliment. And then the conversations die out. Now this guy likes Bon Jovi. He's seen that the girl likes Bon Jovi. They don't have the sense to say that, hey, both of us like Bon Jovi. Do you know Bon Jovi is part of a new band now, right? Or have you heard Bon Jovi's latest track? So we've launched something called Sparks a couple of days back, which is again a premium feature, where we're encouraging them based on all the information we have of them to say, hey, say this to the girl, right?
So it's like an arranged marriage.
We're in a
ये लड्डू TrulyMadly ने बनाए हैं.
So we're in a very nascent, we can.
So you're the mother behind in the kitchen.
Yeah, so there is.
So who does
there's
this?
God up there helping you navigate, and it's not as if girls are any better, right? If you look at conversations by girls, also it ends up at hi, hello, and whatever, and then it kind of dies down because those natural skills, like you said, just don't exist.
Yeah. Plus, I think in our culture, we really are taught that men will take the lead. So you have to wait for the guy to say something.
No, but men take the lead like, if you are a stuck-up person, swipe left. if your grammar is bad, it is so obnoxious. So that obnoxiousness is what is seen as being taking the lead.
And there's no patience, right? They want to get from the app to the bed straight. They don't want to, go through that entire courtship, period, the good old courtship which you saw in Hollywood and Bollywood. I think we need to, go through that.
Sachin, so who teaches these young men? Who's behind this?
Who's your
Other
expert
young
for
men.
which we are paying premium service?
And how do I
Other
get a job
guys.
there? Like,
Yeah, so
I can volunteer.
there's
we
a
can all
resident
work there.
psychologist who does it, so she's doing it now. And we're actually also doing relationship advice now for girls, because girls don't need help with stuff like this, but they need help with how to deal with breakups, how to deal with clingy guys, stuff like that. So we've launched something for them too. So I think we're going back to basics. There was this whole euphoria around dating apps, but we realized that, we need to get the
But this
audience
is the
ready.
revenue model. It's in this.
Yeah, this is all
that's my
services.
point.
This is all paid.
It's always in the merchandise.
Yeah.
It's not in
End of the day,
service.
we have to make money, right? So we've
just-
done enough free seva
yeah,
for
I'm
the
just
last few years.
fascinated that there's actually a real person behind these screens teaching other people how to connect through their screens. There's
Eventually, there'll be a
something-
bot. Eventually, there'll be a bot.
Eventually.
That's the solution to everything. Today, there's a real person.
But I mean,
Are you seeing you're seeing a difference,
I
men
think
and
that,
women?
like all this is true and funny, but the reality is, can we really get away with just blaming guys over girls? It is the space. It is the culture. Like somehow there is a whole part of our existence that we are just taught to hide, control, repress. Like we need this sort of semblance of quote unquote normalcy and steadiness on top as a society. Like we've had this insecurity for very long, and it's cause it expresses itself in all kinds of ways, in repressive ways, in frustration, sometimes in crime, sometimes in just like unhappiness, sheer unhappiness. And we haven't done anything about it. We haven't taught. Like we can, of course, like educational sort of corrective measures are shortcuts. But what conversations are we having with teenagers today, our children, our cousins, friends? How do we navigate these conversations?
This project called Agents of Ishq, and we give sex a good name. And the thing is, we just wanted to create a language where you're talking about love, sex, desire, and all of these things in a way that feels okay, right? And actually, it's shocking that it's not already there. Unfortunately, with the awareness of, as more things are changing and there's mobilities of different types, many of these issues are coming to the forefront, as you're saying. We're talking about our sexuality. We're not wanting to accept misogyny, and that's changing. But after we have confronted the problem, then what? That's the question, right? And unfortunately, I feel our society has become so, like all the media in our society is consumerism driven now. So a space in which you're creating art and you're creating media and you're talking about all of these dilemmas, not giving glib solutions, right? So now what you have is that there's a language of rights around dating and encounters which is insufficient, because it's just not sufficient to say yes means yes and no means no. It's important to say it, but it can't end over there, right? So that in-between space of the maybe, I don't know, I think so, what about, nobody wants to talk about those things. And at the moment that we started Agents of Ishq, we've had like a huge response from people wanting to talk, wanting to write, wanting to use the materials, because people are hungry for that. Yeah. But I think that is not, that's not something that people are putting money, effort, and energy into. But I think that as slowly it's always artists who respond first to these needs. The market does not respond to them, right? Like Freud said, wherever I go, I find a poet has been there first. So in a sense that artists sense what people need, artists create, and then markets make those things into wider kind of applications. Yeah. Which then make society more conservative. But the thing is, then artists have to go somewhere else and start digging again, right? But I feel that there are a few projects that are beginning to respond to this. And I think Vishaka's here. So you also see Sexuality and Disability and Erotics India, and then, so many different kinds of small organizations that are trying to respond to this complexity, not to do it in a simplistic way. And I think it's important that the divide between the mainstream and the alternative be genuinely bridged, because that is the exciting thing about technology. And we have to accept that those people who call themselves indie online are mostly not indie. They are the new mainstream. So we should stop relying on them to produce materials that will really reflect the complexity of our lives and be entertaining and fun, right? Yeah. So we need to create that new language. And now technology has given us a moment in which we can actually, all these worlds can come together and make materials that will make it easier for people to talk. And I feel if you think of men, stop me if I'm going on for too long, but if you think of men of an earlier generation, they did know how to talk to women because there was a kind of language of courtship, as Sachin said, and there was also a kind of respect. And if I think of my father's generation, I feel they were men who had a little bit more interest in the world. Therefore, they were also able to talk to women in a different way, right? So if you read poetry, if you took an interest in what's going on, and if you had all of those aspects of your personality alive and awake, you learned how to talk to other people. Yeah. We are the daughters of those fathers because they had that breadth of vision. They could understand that, my child is not just a girl, she's a person with many, many aspirations. Yeah. So I feel like that is something, if we bring it back into the space of arts and media, it will make a very big difference to all of this confusion.
Yeah. I want to actually take off from that as well. And as you said, as we are together creating this new language, a lot of the online ecosystem of love, sex, and desire seems to be the search for the other, right? This either to stop being lonely or to find a perfect match or the ideal person or whatever. But what about the search, and you hinted upon it as well, and all of us learning this language, what about the search for the self? I mean, how are all of us creating both a language and then the sense of agency to find one's own self, whether it's whether it's love for one's own self or whether it's sex with one's own self, and with how that desire goes there. So it's a rambling question, but if any of you have thoughts on that.
So, as my research, and I went on the dating sites, I found for myself that being asked questions and being made to reflect on what you want is really interesting because you may know these things in a nebulous fashion, but having to write it down in words, express it, at least to make the effort. There are people who don't fill out anything on their profiles, is a challenging exercise. I would imagine that it's empowering for a lot of people to then think about something, articulate it, not just to themselves, but then to the world, and own it.
Yeah.
So
filling out profiles, is challenging, but.
Can I be a wet blanket here? Because I found the opposite, that it's, at least from people that I've talked to, and I think this is a global phenomenon. I think right now we're talking a lot India-specific, and partly it is India-specific, but a lot of things such as connecting online versus offline is something that people are struggling with globally, and what it means to just be talking online and then talking in the real world. But I found that you lose the sense of self because so much of it is performative online, not just for the person that you are sending a particular picture to, but the more you understand the system, someone's always watching. And that creates a sense of performance that allows you to not consider your own position within it, but as much as just performing for others. At least that's something that I've found.
Can I interject and say some of us like performance?
Yes, we know.
I know Ramesh.
We noticed.
But even before that, I think for some, when I was filling, say, Grindr profile or whatever, right? Top, bottom, versatile, whatever, all these things are there. It forces you to question in a way that you might never have questioned yourself. So what am I, right? And then maybe that act of filling out that profile form has enabled me to imagine new possibilities for myself and then perform those possibilities in a space which is relatively, sorry, Paromita.
Actually, my first encounter with this whole world of dating, because that's not something we did in India growing up in my time, right? Like that concept didn't exist. Like you had friends and then you were going around with them or not or whatever. The terminology was different. And then, my friend, I was complaining to her about not being able to meet anybody, and she created a profile for me on Rediff, which had some kind of a matchmaking thing that time, right? And I read my profile. So she didn't tell me she was doing it. She just created it. She sent me the password and the name, and I still have that identity because I feel so sentimental about it. And I went and I read my profile, and I thought, oh my God, that is an exactly good profile and an exactly correct thing of what I would like to get, right? So I also think there's a psychiatrist who wrote a piece on Agents of Ishq about mental sexual health. And when I was talking to her, told me that there is a kind of epidemic of loneliness amongst young people. And there's a sense of extreme vulnerability because for a number of reasons, they have not been brought up to really deal with the real world. Their parents have also protected them a lot. A lot goes into forming that identity, but they don't know. So they feel they find the real world kind of difficult, right? And I also find that a lot of young people say that they don't have close friends, we did a workshop in a college, and on the spur of the moment, I asked them, how many of you have a best friend? And I think only about 20% of the class raised their hand. So in a way, this thing that happened for me, my friend made my profile, I could talk to her, I could have this kind of an open and honest relationship with her, which helps me to know myself, not all alone, but with other people. I think that's kind of missing for people a lot. And it's difficult to know yourself all on your own.
I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, but the one simple thing I would submit is that identity is a continuous project. It's an evolving project. Who you are, your understanding of yourself, your expression of yourself does evolve. And there is this intense glare of performance, as you've said, that's come up with, particularly social media and just like having to perform or conform. It's existed before, mind you. People dressing the same way or behaving the same way, like that desire to perform or conform has existed before in other formats. It's now being expressed in a more sort of everyday, what's on my Snapchat, and how many people's liked it kind of addiction. But it is an evolving process, and you have to realize that who we are. We all struggle with, first of all, defining ourselves, and then do we define ourselves in terms of ourselves or in terms of sort of a reflection of where we place ourselves in the society from a normative level, from a community level. And which is why I think, so very primitive, very early on, so there were girls who would try Tinder for a day and tell me, what, I felt very empowered because I could say no. I swiped left to this really hot guy. That was the most empowering thing I've done. I had a choice, I had a voice. Like initially, the first experience, I've had so many, especially very young people, because somehow you think saying no and like expressing it and that actually sort of meaning something hasn't existed. And you realize, and I hear these stories over and over and over again, as we navigate conversation, as you talk to someone who comes from a very different echo chamber as the one that you are currently inhabiting, you learn something. You may agree, you may disagree, but you just are exposed to a perspective in a one-on-one setting, which is more intimate and less performative eventually when you start having that conversation. So net what I'm saying is technology can and does help in personal growth. It takes time. It's no instant cure. You are not one person. You're not going to stay who you are forever for the rest of your life. And I think every conversation, every two people have, both of them end up growing just a tiny bit every single time. And I think that's something worth doing.
I hope your psychologist is telling people this stuff.
It's not that deep. No, I guess increasingly becoming more malleable, right? We are what, I don't know, our followers want us to be on social media in a manner of speaking. So yeah, that's pretty much, I mean, I agree with what these guys are saying, but that's how we are. This is not, it's probably a generalization, but we are more malleable, right?
We call this love, sex, and desire today, LSD. And while all of them are deeply interlinked, each one of them actually highlights different aspects of intimacy. So I'm wondering, as a concluding thought, before we open it up to everyone, how are we as India teasing apart the difference between love, sex, and desire from our own experiences, either with apps, either with podcasts, either with Agents of Ishq and your film, Paromita. So this is, how are we teasing out these differences between all these three terms?
I think they're all the same, yeah, pretty much. They all collide, and they're all the same. I mean, that's in a nutshell. And I've got a flight to catch.
So in our podcast, we get questions where it seems to me that most people confuse them for each other. So everything is confused for love. Sex is confused for love. Desire is confused for love. Love is this nebulous question mark everybody's looking for. How is technology doing for us? I think it's just confusing us a little more.
So we are finding ourselves, but we are being confused and bargain. What about Paro?
They're a continuum, right? I mean, there are differences and there are samenesses, and I quite like the idea that everything can be loving, because love always means, yeah, now we have to get married and everybody's unimportant and only you are important. So I don't love that idea, but you can have loving sex and you can have loving desires and sexy love. So, yeah.
And we are having all of it in contemporary India.
Thanks,
across.
so many apps.
I found something really interesting in the last 2 months that I've been researching this. I've been talking to a lot of different people working in the industry of love, sex, desire all together about what they do. And I find the words love and desire are very often used, but the word sex isn't. You could be having a conversation about selling sex toys with the person making them, but the word sex in sex toys wouldn't be used. You'd get euphemisms, you'd get toys, you'd get ha, wo baat, and then, but the word sex is never said, and I think there's something powerful and particular about sex in India that sets it differently from love in India and desire in India, which seem to be more easily said.
Does anyone want to, I mean, I think that's very important. Is there a desi way of doing sex or talking about sex, which is not talking about sex?
Desis like to not talk about it and do it, and they get very uncomfortable if you talk about it. You know, that's what they always say. But I think there are lost ways of talking about sex that we should recover. It's not.
And we're going to open it up for some questions with that.
I have to say, I did not agree with most of the things the two dating apps are endorsing over here. Firstly, I feel that it's not dating app. I think the dating era, like Paromita said, it's already out there. It's very well exposed. What is not exposed and what we should be bringing out of the closet are hookups. This is what is happening today. To say that women don't want to go straight to bed is again a very, very incorrect notion. So you guys may be talking about empowerment and all that, but you're shoving us back in.
But who said that?
No, like you said, that men just want to go straight to bed. I would say
I
that
said
there
men. I didn't say
like
women.
that's what I'm saying. So there are women also who want to go straight to bed.
Yeah, fair enough.
Not just men.
No, I'm sorry, but you're talking about a very, very small percentage
That's
of...
your assumption.
No,
Your assumption.
I'm sorry. I have
That
not...
is
There
very
is no
well your
assumptions.
assumption.
This is research.
Can I complete?
Research
Can I
across
complete?
5,000 to 6,000 girls. I'm sorry, so I don't
Yeah,
take
let me
that at all.
complete. 5-6 hours is what? I mean, we guys are using it, right? We are the ones
Yeah, but
using
you
the
need
app.
some-
And I'm just talking from a woman perspective. I'm not even going from a queer women perspective because you guys are not even talking about it. So there's no breaking of taboos. There's nothing. You guys are, like I said, just talking the same thing about breaking the taboos and doing your best. And I guess your intentions are, but the actions are not doing so. Sorry.
I can just disagree with you, and I'm sorry, but...
I'm curious on two counts. One is, like you were saying when you were filling out this form, and then you had to think about, am I a top, am I a bottom? And I'm wondering about how this actually forces sort of a categorization of yourself into certain boxes that wasn't there first. And the second also relates to, again, like what you were saying, you have to teach them, like look a certain way, use these filters. I'm curious about how this is changing your desires about how you want to look or what you want to do. Like, how is it changing those aspects offline? Like, and is it bringing a sort of new set of pains as well as a new set of pleasures? Or is it, all like liberatory and emancipatory and all of that?
No, it's not all liberating for sure, but you got to showcase yourself, right, in the best possible way to get a match. That's the market reality of sorts, right? So that's pretty much what it's about. It's nothing deeper than that. Right? And at times, I'm not saying we teach that to everyone, right? But there are certain profiles, there are certain guys and girls both who have really good profiles, on paper, well-educated, probably good-looking, great set of interests, etc. But they just put up bad pictures. So it's a very simple thing. We just ask them to put up better pictures. It's nothing deeper than that in a lot of cases. Actually, 80 to 90% of the recommendations that we make can actually be made by bots. Because they're very basic, simple things, and so that's pretty much what it's about.
Yeah, so I think conformity is the name of the game. You're an outlier if you don't have the pout and the mandatory vacation picture in front of X monument and like the Breaking Bad and whatever else that other people like.
But is there data to prove that the pouting vacation picture does better?
Yeah, clearly. And the passport.
No, so to answer your question, I think sure it forms categorization and conforming those categories is good, but for a large amount of us who don't even know about the alternative categories of desire, it's very nice to read it on a list, and because then you are, oh, what is this? What is I had no idea what, the past year I'm reading everyone's sapiosexual, I had no idea last year what a sapiosexual is. Now suddenly everyone's turned on by intelligence. Now, don't look for, I really don't want to be turned on by intelligence in that, but it's so interesting to learn these new categories.
I agree with her. I'm not sure if we're just speaking about empowerment here. As a psychologist, your dating apps are part of enough therapy sessions, As a psychologist, I have enough sessions every week where I'm discussing this. So for me, one, it's absolutely alienating. I'm accepting it may be empowering. B, we so often talk about how I'm dating someone, but I have a backup on Tinder because in case it doesn't work out, so there's always a backup. So I don't even put into a relationship because there's always a backup waiting for me. Second, I don't know if you guys are researching, but I think there's a huge amount of literature that's out there about the amount of anxiety any kind of app, whether you call it dating or you don't call it dating, is, what anxiety is it creating? And third, I agree completely. We may say that we are empowering women or men, whatever, in the context of LGBTQ. I think we are again fitting them into a stereotype. My clients tell me that I read an article about how should I create a good profile. So of course, I'm creating a stereotype and I'm creating a good profile that fits with your algorithm. So I really wonder if there's any research around it. If any of you have anything
I think this is Taru, Sachin.
Yeah, anyone, who's doing research. I would be very happy to, discuss later if it's taking too much time.
No, we should talk anyway because this is not a perfect world. This is not a perfect solution. As I was saying earlier, the pressure to conform or the pressure to be a certain way has always existed in different formats, and it creates anxiety, whether it's offline, whether it's social, whether it's structural. It's always existed. Now technology hastens it because you see it, there's a spotlight which is sort of wider, and there's this anxiety there's like lack of patience a little bit, right? So you can be an outlier. You can decide to not have the pouty picture, that's fine. And because you're looking for someone else who's probably an outlier, what you then need is the fortitude to sort of not to expect to find someone like this. People want solutions in a jiffy, and this is not a perfect world. We're not sorted. We haven't solved the whole problem, and we possibly, it will take a while because we're all different and it's complex and it evolves, it involves emotions and values and, other insecurities to varying degrees, many of which are unexpressed and very hard to codify for 7 billion people in the world in an algorithm. But that's why we continuously say, there is no replacement. There's no algorithm for chemistry. So ultimately, what works is connections. But if you get a shot at, if it improves your odds to find someone, if it puts you out there, and that takes a certain amount of fortitude because there's vulnerability and there is, and there is the side effect when you're vulnerable. If you might fail, it might take long, and that could happen if you are putting yourself in the arranged marriage market and getting rejected. That could happen if you're trying to get a job and trying to sort of have a CV of a certain sort to be selected and getting rejected. Like the anxiety, the emotion is very similar. But it takes work, it takes fortitude, and nobody's saying that we don't have problems, that different individuals respond differently. But at least by increasing the odds, by having a LinkedIn that helps you sort of show who you are or your CVs, it's increasing the odds of somebody whose job is probably the right one for you to find you. And you might have to navigate through 3 misfit jobs before you find the perfect job, but at least it's increasing that odds of getting it, and that's an improvement. Is it perfect? No. Is it solved? No. Will there be a one-size solution that fits everyone? I don't think so. No. It's an imperfect science, but at the end of that, we have to realize technology is merely a tool created by human beings and something that we're constantly working on. If human beings are so complex and evolving and changing and differ from a Vikroli to a Kolaba to a Vashi.
No, Vikroli is way cooler. Yeah.
Cooler, right? So more cooler, right? So again, that's different.
Yeah.
We have to embrace the difference. We have to realize that we will not find answers, but just this ability to have, more of an arts, ability to say, to have a psychologist, to have a support group, to have a community where you feel psychologically safe to discover you're not the only one facing this anxiety. You need patience, you need fortitude, and maybe there are ways that could help. Maybe there are ways to spruce up your CV so that your employer actually knows who you are. There are all those things. There are tools and tricks. They are not solutions. They are not a panacea. And I wish if there was this magic one algorithm or huge bowl where everybody's name could be put, and like the perfect soulmates or perfect friends and everything would come out in one like great human race would be very happy.
No, then the fun would go. But I played this game actually at a party. But even before Sachin, I want y'all, when you ask your question, realize that there's a reason why we've mixed a panel which has, two people who are trying to solve this from a business perspective and two creative entrepreneurs as well, to give us a range of opinions. So I'm kind of feeling for Taru and Sachin right now who are getting accusatory questions, but you please also realize that they're running businesses. They're not doing social service. They're running businesses. No, and I think it's very important to frame that Agents of Ishq is an information space and LSDcast is a podcast. So they're all coming at it from their perspectives. But please realize that this is also a market and there's also money to be made in that. But Paromita wants to respond, yeah.
Well, I think, like anxiety about technologies, panics about new technologies and what they do. This is a very kind of forever thing. Like when telephones came, when the postal system came, people were anxious, And so when there was postal system, we were like, "Meri chitti pahunchi ki nahi pahunchi? Should I make a trunk call to the boy and ask him, did you get the letter?" And so now it's what she's saying, I think is true, that technology is multiplying that. So where you thought about one letter for a period of 1 month, now you think about every second, whatever. And I think there is also a kind of neuroscience to it, Like this cell phone is like this giant dopamine, provider. So, and the way that technologies are, they are feeding into those addictions. And I think that is true, that everything is created around a method of likes and numbers. And the more likes you have, the more dopamine hits you're getting. So you're addicted. And of course, I do agree. I don't agree with the panic about the anxiety, but I do agree that the structures play into human addiction tendencies a lot more, and that is something to think about. As what are these algorithms and these structures doing to us I'm saying scientifically. So they are playing into our addictions. That is something we don't know how to solve. Yeah. Because we like it.
My startup, its pleasure mainly deals into intimate products. So 80% of female questions deals into what the product is, how is it useful, and how is it, will make our sex life better. 80% of male questions is, will I become a porn king? So is it like there's something, gene inside us which is just binary? It's like either I'm good, either I'm bad. There's nothing between these two. And can it be improved somehow? Because from education point of view, there's a lot of stuff on the internet. So can it be improved somehow?
This is such a massive question with such massive answer. It's not genetic, definitely, I think. It's what we put out there every day. We had a question recently from somebody who was feeling performance anxiety, and I think he spoke for a lot of people. And our response was, because you're comparing yourself to porn. Are you crazy? Those people were chosen to be in that porn movie because they have certain assets, like they auditioned, and they're paid money for it. And it's fiction, it's a film. Your life is not a porn film. So there's so many things that need to be done about this perception, both for women, men. We've also talked about pop culture, and we've, in the course of this, learned phrases like starfish sex. Do you know what starfish sex is? It's basically what romance novels teach you, which is that the woman just lies there, and the man does all the work. And this is something that's inculcated in men and women. So women are about pleasing, I'm generalizing like crazy, of course, but women are about pleasing their partner and being a good partner. And men are like, how do I score and be good? Sorry?
I think actually this kind of thing is really important in terms of research, because the kind of things that people will say in answer to one research process and another research process are different. So people don't and women more than men, but people don't like to admit what they're really thinking. So when the TrulyMadly research will happen, they'll say one set of things. And when your research will happen, they'll say another set of things. So this is a kind of difficulty, and it's interesting when that question comes up in the same place, because it throws up the real issue that needs to be resolved, which is to make many, many more types of porn films, instead of everybody watching only one type. When I say porn, I say a lot more eroticism in society that people can choose from, because right now they don't know how to find other kinds of pornography. And in the porn industry also, it's going to go the same way as they're going to give you more of what people want to watch. So you'll end up watching one type of porn instead of finding a diversity of porn, finding a diversity of eroticism, romance, everything. We need to make like huge amounts of that as something that will be both commercially successful but culturally very important, right?
And also encourage people to take ownership of their own sexuality, men or women.
Like even understand sexuality in a more diverse way.
So we
Okay, so now Sachin's going to go. So if there's any Sachin-specific questions, you have one, because we can just ask him, and then we'll continue for about like 5-6 more minutes. Any Sachin-specific questions? Okay, so Sachin, if you want to catch your flight, can we truly madly give him a big send-off?
This is regarding privacy and snooping. Earlier, we used to deal with hostel wardens or society secretaries and all. With the technology, we have very strange kind of snooping, policing happening. I had personal crazy experience when one of my political posts was objected by some political party, and I was summoned by Gujarat police. So when I reached there, they already had 3 huge files of what all I browse, what all I chat, okay, every detail they had, and I was blackmailed for my personal chats over that. So it was a crazy experience, and I was thinking, like, if you want to be activist, you have to be completely, matlab, Gandhi ji ban ke raho, because every other side is being snooped. And actually, right now I'm on observation, so my phones are tabbed and everything's tabbed. And
Snapchat is the answer.
Then some of my friends are being blackmailed by the police right now in Bombay because they have sexual partners, and which is not acceptable in society, and the cops are trying to blackmail for some other reason. So it is a very crazy thing which is happening with technology.
So it's a good question. How does one do LSD in the age of snooping? Bishaka, where are you? Okay. We'll go back to Bishaka later. But Bishaka will tell you. Bishaka has all the answers and some questions also that you should ask. Sure. Do you want to give a hand or mic over? Yeah.
There's actually a great booklet that came out of Brazil, which was called How to Create Safer, like how to, if you send nude images of yourself, how to do them more safely. And basically, it's a whole range of things that you have to do to, keep yourself very, very private, so that precisely what you were talking about, right? Like your personal preferences, the way you have sex, whatever you want to do, you can do peacefully without people finding out about it. But frankly, everything related to that is like hardcore tech stuff, which is nowhere near as interesting as the conversation we're having, but something to think about. And when you spoke, actually, my blood froze hearing about this.
Is there a website that they can go to or resources that they can access that you can give out?
I think the easiest is if you just actually just Google digital privacy. Yeah, and then pick up whatever makes sense for you, because it's a whole arc of stuff. But yeah, worth taking seriously.
And I found using the browser Tor, T-O-R, has been like the simplest and easiest way to at least get over the initial sort of fear and scare of who's looking at your information. It's not perfect, but it's very easy for someone who isn't technology savvy like me, and that's been the first step for at least me.
So kind of a quick 2-part question. The first part is I've always wondered how long it takes for people to swipe left versus swipe right on Tinder. And the reason that I am thinking about that is because I've been thinking a lot about intimacy, and I agree with the panel that like what online dating does is it sort of troubles the norms that we've put around intimacy, is like, oh, it has to be this romantic thing where you're like in pain and longing for the other until you finally find someone who like will put up with you and etc. Right? And so I wonder how a world where it takes 2 seconds, right, to sort of make this decision between left and right shapes the expectations that we have for what love is supposed to look like, desire is supposed to look like, etc.
Answer to your question. There's a song, if you get your phones out at some point after this, called Left Swipe That, which a bunch of youngsters have just made about left swiping on the go, and it's turned into a very catchy song being like, all of these different things that are wrong, I'd left swipe that. So I think it's engaged popular culture in such an exciting way, where people are left swipe that doesn't mean just not saying left swiping a partner, but saying no to a variety of different other choices. And I think it's capturing the younger generation, and I say that as someone who is on the younger side, but people who have never known technology not as part of their lives in a different way, which is another thing that we've been talking about so far, technology coming in. For a lot of people, technology has always been in, and dating apps have been in. So for them, left swipe that, or swiping right or left is just a way of saying yes and no, not necessarily about love and romance.
He's asking how much time they take to decide.
Yeah.
So she's going to answer the Tinder question, but I read research that says that even when you meet somebody in person, it takes less than 3 seconds to make up your mind, whether it's left or right swipe. So
Same online, 3 seconds.
So I don't really have it. I do know that different people behave differently. Girls, or like generalizing here, but on an average, girls spend a lot more time reading through bios and looking through all the pictures. There are guys, especially in engineers and very smart guys, who think, okay, I'm going to beat the odds and just swipe right. And actually, our system, algorithm, takes into account for that, penalizes you for those kind of behaviors. But eventually, but people
You didn't know
that,
that,
right? You want to, so you can't really sort of. It's a system, but it's not a law. Like, people adapt it, people do things differently. What she's saying is right. At the core of it, it reflects the real life in a certain way. There is a reason why Tinder became the global phenomenon. It's not even a 4-year-old company, but it is a global pioneer, and there are a couple of reasons for that. But one of the most important is that it emulates real life in certain ways. You're sitting in this room, and if I have to have a conversation with someone, I'm probably looking, and your mind, the human mind, is capable of processing a lot of information from very, very thin visual signals. You can know a lot about a person from the contextual information that visual provides, right? Somehow and a lot of it is subconscious, you don't realize it, but that's part of the chemistry. And the magic is lowering this. So there's something interesting about you that I would like to have a conversation. But this barrier is because maybe there's that interesting thing, unless it's super compelling, Bollywood-esque love at first sight, where I want to just tire myself, which basically never happens in real life. It's so intimidating to have that conversation. And maybe even you want to talk to me, but right now you're in a frame of mind where I'm disruptive to your thought or your conversation, and you're going to say no. And the first time you're going to say no, I'm going to think 100 times before I go to another person.
I am a little conflicted over here. Earlier she asked about the hooking up. I am not sure if you are aware, Tinder is aware that Tinder is actually, in very normal day-to-day conversation, called not a dating app but a hookup app. We always consciously say it, and Tinder is not a dating app, it's a hookup app. So people suggest, oh, you're going to Mumbai, check out these places, go to these restaurants, and Tinder, and find out people to just sort of, hook up with. And I think that is great. That kind of has given us a lot of women as well as men to open up with that whole idea of that women just can have sex like having a good food at a good restaurant in a new city. But then Tinder changed the whole approach, and then today also you said a lot of things about how human connections and conversations, which I think is kind of was not the purpose, and is kind of missing in the whole way the app is structured. I thought it was just kind of hooking
So you are
out.
saying they become too sanskari.
Yeah, now you kind of trying to be not hook up and all dating. So I think
thinking
it
you're
was
too sanskari.
earlier it was a hook up thing,
No.
so that was.
So I think, I'm not. So a lot of perception is, a lot of conversation, a lot of perception is driven by what you've heard, what your popular media is. It's much more fun and to talk about hookup than a normal conversation.
No,
that's
hookup
not the
is normal,
headline.
Taru. Don't shame
You're never gonna
hookups.
see that as a headline. You're never you're gonna share a sleazy conversation with your friends on a lunch table. Much more, there is a certain type of things that we like to talk about. That's human nature. We never say that hookups don't happen on Tinder. We never say that marriages don't happen on Tinder. Tinder is neither. Tinder is neither a hookup app, neither a matrimony app. It's what you make of it.
I want to ask you, why are we like this only?
Why are we?
I mean,
Give us the
one of
answer.
the things is we are like this because we're not all like Parmesh. But it's also things that she's saying there's a kind of colonial history which has erased so much of what culture was.
we're a very hierarchical society also. So we like to preserve everything in a hierarchy, and we're not so comfortable disrupting that hierarchy because there's advantage to being in that hierarchy, and there's progress. And I think one of the big things that we do is we bring up our kids to be very like tunnel vision. You should like ace your exam, then you should get a job, then you should get married. So this kind of linear existence, it makes it very difficult to also deviate from the norm, right? So if you're not going to bring up your kids with a more holistic sense of what they are as people, how are those conversations ever going to occur in society? So yeah, there's political reasons, economic reasons, historical reasons, sociological reasons, but at an individual level, I feel being aware of these. Also, I just want to make a personal request, which I make everywhere, that we have to stop saying India is a land of Khajuraho and Kama Sutra, because India is a land of so many more things than that. And I think it's a great starting point to find out all the things, all the traditions that exist, and like keep working that into our contemporary culture. I mean, that's the kind of thing we can do together with kids. So we have to think of projects that we can do with each other.
We can say Jamali, Kamali in Delhi.
Yes,
We can say so many.
Yeah. I mean, there are books on aphrodisiacs from the 19th century. There's like, there's Geet Kovind. There's multiple texts. It's not just the Kama Sutra, which is a book written by nerds.